It's now my pleasure to introduce my colleague from ARPA-E's counterpart at the Department of Defense, Dr. Arati Prabhakar, Director of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA. Dr. Prabhakar was appointed to be the Director of DARPA in July 2012. She spent her career investing in world-class engineers and scientists to create new technologies and businesses. Prior to DARPA, she was a general partner at U.S. Venture Partners, where she focused on energy and information technology startups. Prior to moving to Silicon Valley, Arati served as the director of the National Institute of Standards and Technologies from 1993 to 1997. Arati received her PhD in applied physics and her bachelor's in electrical engineering. She began her career as a congressional fellow at the Office of Technology Assessment. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Arati Prabhakar.
So much, Cheryl. It's so terrific to be here with all of you at the ARPA-E Summit. I am here because I really believe in this experiment called ARPA-E. And that means the people in the agency, it means the performer community, and it means this much bigger group that's come here together to focus on the work that ARPA-E is doing. I am really proud of what this agency has started. I really want it to be a huge success over time. What I want to do today in my time with you is talk a little bit about what success means for an ARPA, for an Advanced Research Projects Agency. A couple of reasons for that. One is I want to highlight what ARPA-E has gotten so right in these first few years. The second reason is I really want to encourage all of you who support this activity, who support the ARPA-E dream, to give this agency the time that it needs, have the patience with it that it's really going to need, because for revolutions to really take root and grow and change the world, that's a process that takes significant patience and time. So let's talk a little bit about both of those. This ARPA business is really personal for me. So let me just start by telling you a little bit about why I came back to DARPA. I came back last summer after 19 years off doing other things. Very early in my career, from 86 to 93, I had the chance to be a program manager and then an office director at DARPA. I got to do a whole bunch of really terrific things, other parts of government, 15 years in Silicon Valley. But last summer I got the opportunity to return to DARPA as the director, and as I thought about what had come out of the investments that I had made, my colleagues had made back in my earlier time at DARPA, I looked around and, last summer I thought, well, look at what's happening in the military arena. If you look there, you see night vision technology, communications technologies, navigation capabilities, stealth aircraft, UAVs, a set of capabilities that together create an overwhelming battlefield advantage. If I looked in the Silicon Valley environment that I was living in at that time, I saw this revolution happening in consumer devices and wireless capabilities, and all of that was building on top of many generations of information technologies, all the way from semiconductors and software to networking and architectures and communications. Again, a whole raft of technical capabilities that DARPA had been part of laying the groundwork for. And then I thought about the people that I was interacting with in my Silicon Valley life, but more broadly thinking about technology leadership across the country, and I saw so many of the people that we had invested in who had gone off and ended up making huge contributions to business, to national security, to academia. And I thought, this is why I really have to go back to DARPA, because if you really care about that kind of impact on national security, on our technology base, on our people, there really isn't any other place that can do that set of things. And that's why, to me, it was a tremendous privilege to come back and be able to lead an organization that today is planting those seeds for the next generation, the next set of revolutions and capability for our nation's security. So that's DARPA. Of course, ARPA-E's focus is energy, but in true ARPA style. ARPA-E is focused on changing the world, is thinking about changing people's minds about what's possible, focused on creating huge strides forward in capability. That's what ARPA organizations do. And to do those hard things, ARPA-E is able to take on significant technical risk and to challenge itself and to challenge this much wider technical community. So, you know, that's a bond that we share, and I really want to talk a little bit about that. Now, ARPA-E, of course, is working on radical new ideas in every aspect of energy, from solar technologies to what we can do on the grid, to new ideas for transportation energy, for carbon capture, ideas in energy storage, very wide range of things. In our world at DARPA today, we are focused on thinking in fresh ways about air dominance in the next generation, about new technologies for vertical takeoff and landing. How do we reinvent the helicopter? We're trying to eliminate the cost barriers in space. We're trying to come up with fundamental new approaches that change the game in cybersecurity. We're working on electronic warfare technologies and position navigation and timing, PNT technologies, that we think will be a leapfrog ahead in capability in those areas. We're working on how we can detect and then very quickly treat infectious diseases as they spread, particularly in a biodefense context. And then beyond that, as we think about some of the enabling technologies that we think will be critical for the next generation of national security, we're starting now to understand some pathways for unlocking the full potential of the human brain. We're doing some work to build the tools in the communities in new fields like synthetic biology and big data, places where we think a technical infrastructure can unleash many, many new waves of innovation in many, many different fields. So, you know, the work that we're going to do, our missions at DARPA and at ARPA-E are distinct. The technical areas where we invest are different, although I'm sure from time to time there will be places where we can connect to mutual benefit. But behind all of that is a foundation that we share. And I really just wanted to reflect today on two aspects of how this kind of an innovation engine, an ARPA-like innovation engine, what really makes it successful. Let me talk about two pieces. One is people and one is about timescales. Let's start with people, always the most important part of the story. And the starting point for the ARPA model, this is a model for investment and innovation that begins by recognizing that we're going to do work by tapping this vast technical community, not just the people inside our own four walls, but really those people's job is to reach outside and work across the university community, all the labs that we have in the country, the companies, big, small, established companies, new startups. Those are the technical communities that we have the privilege of tapping, and that's a huge freedom for an ARPA-like organization. It means that we're not limited to cooking dinner with whatever's in the pantry. We can go out and shop across all of this capability. But I think it also underscores that we're really only one part of a much richer ecosystem that actually has to be highly functional and highly capable if we're going to meet our nation's needs, be it national security or energy. So that's part one, is the fact that we're designed in both cases to work with this much broader technical community. Now let's talk about the people that are inside of our agencies, because a central tenet in the ARPA model for DARPA as well as for ARPA-E is to center our operations on great program managers. So who are these people? Well, at DARPA, our program managers, about 90 strong at the moment, come from all kinds of different places. One of my program managers at DARPA used to be VP of Engineering at a very successful Silicon Wi-Fi company. Another of my program managers is a pretty recent PhD out of MIT who spent a few years working in the Senate after congressional fellowship. I have other program managers who are doing a 3 or 5 year tour with us from their role as university professors. I have a program manager who's a lieutenant colonel in the Army and brings a very specific set of understanding about the military aspect of what we do. I have a program manager who's a neurologist, a practicing MD in that field. So very wide range of backgrounds. I have people who are early in their careers, in the middle of their careers, and people who have already had hugely successful careers. So quite a diversity of backgrounds, but there are several characteristics that our program managers share, and I see very much the same elements in our sister agency over at ARPA-E. Let me share what some of those key characteristics are when you look under the hood and see what's inside of these ARPAs. The first really critical characteristic for our program managers is that they are driven to have impact. These are people who run into work in the morning because they have to go drive their programs because they know they're going to change the world. And that impatience, that drive to get things done, and then with it the ability to actually get things done, that's a core capability that has to be part of every successful program manager. Obviously, these are program managers who are technically very, very solid, who have a rigorous engineering and scientific background that lets them exercise judgment about technologies. Perhaps less obvious, but I think equally important, is the ability to exercise strong judgment about technologists, because it's really by working with this broad community that they're going to achieve their impact. So that drive to have impact, the technical judgment to go with it. And then after that, I think another really key element is dynamic range, really the ability to go from atom to device to system to what difference does it make, and ultimately how is it going to change the world, and then to navigate, coherently up and down from impact down to the technical details in a way that is clear and understandable to the many audiences that we deal with. And then finally, for our program managers, my aspiration is always that we have program managers who are confident without arrogance. First of all, because you can't get anything done if you're not confident, but lacking that arrogance, I think, is also key, because our folks really, the really great program managers in our agency, understand what a privilege it is to have this opportunity for public service, and they recognize that it's not about them. It's really about doing a job for our country, and that's another key element in the characteristics that we always look for. So, these people are running to work in the morning because that's who they are. That sense of urgency is very innate. It's reinforced by the fact that we rotate our program managers through the agency. They don't stay forever. They're not, 30-year people who come in with a commitment to do this same thing forever. They typically come for 3 to 5 years. That's important for them because of the drive and the sense of urgency. It's important for us, too, because it's always heartbreaking when one of my great program managers leaves, but that is the reason that I can go find the next person who can bring in the next set of great new ideas and keep driving this engine forward. So that's part one, is getting those great people. But great people really can't do anything unless they are empowered to go do things, and that's the second part of the equation about the people in our ARPA organizations. Our technical management team exists to recruit, which is a constant challenge given the high bar and the fact that we're flowing people through. So they're spending a lot of their time recruiting, they're spending a lot of their time coaching, they are setting a high bar for individuals to win the resources that they need. And these programs have good oversight, but at no point is there any confusion in people's minds about the authority and the responsibility that our program managers have. Those are some of the elements at DARPA that I think are critical. I'm really happy to see that both in legislation and in implementation, ARPA-E has driven a stake in the ground about some of these essential notions about how they organize, how they recruit, the caliber of the people that they've been able to bring in. So I think that's really a terrific place to start. Let me shift gears and talk about the second part of achieving success in this ARPA model, and that has to do with time scales. The first time scale is the one that's driven by the urgency of our mission, and it's measured in hours and days and weeks, and that is the time scale that we care about when we look at how long does it take to go from new insight to a funded program that's getting dollars in the hands of performers so that real technical work can happen. And that's the time scale that we think about when we look at the technical results that come out of our programs, and we're urgently pushing to have somebody else take that next step, whether it's private investment, whether it's a customer in the Defense Department, in our case, picking up that technology and starting to turn it into a real capability. So that's the day-to-day time scale, but at the same time that we are heads down focused on working with our performers, making those links with customers, driving the technology day to day, we also think about a very different time scale, and that is the time scale that is going to be required for a complete revolution in capabilities. And we need to keep our eye on that as well, because it is really for those foundational transformations that an ARPA organization exists. And you know, all of us have had the experience. Remember 1 year in the early 90s, everyone you knew overnight seemed to have an email address. Well, that happened after many, many decades of investment that trace back to the early 60s at DARPA, when Licklider was hired when DARPA was the age that ARPA-E is today, and that was the first in a series of hires that led to the beginnings of this thing called the ARPANET, which over many, many decades grew to the point that it could become an overnight success in the eyes of the consumer and in the broader population. And if you remember the first time you looked at your iPhone and you realized that blinking blue dot on the map was actually tracking wherever you drove or wherever you walked, and that miraculous feeling of some overnight capability, remember that the first ideas about understanding where you were and navigating from satellites traces back even more decades even than the internet. So these dramatic transformations require time to take root, to grow, and then ultimately to blossom. So, you know, the thing that I really hope to see with ARPA-E is that all of you who are involved in this community, the performers, the other supporters, the Department of Energy, the White House, in this administration and in the future, Congress on both sides of the aisle, in this Congress in the future, if we can all give ARPA-E the time that it really takes for these kinds of dramatic transformations, I think that a lot of good will come out of that, because I think they're on a very, very good track. Let me finish by telling you about a moment that really defined the DARPA experience for me. Last summer I was at a meeting where a young Army major was showing us the equipment that they carried in the field. He had led a group that was going out on a mission in Afghanistan. He was showing us all the gadgets that they had. They had communications, they had displays, they had navigation gear, they had batteries to go with all of that. I'm hoping you all are going to help us fix some of those problems. But he was telling us about a particular day when they were figuring out what they were going to carry. They knew they had a particularly challenging set of encounters ahead of them. And that day they chose to take some additional electronics instead of food and water. And when I heard him say that and I thought about that choice, in that moment, 7 years of really hard work that I had done at DARPA many years before, in that moment, those 7 years became completely worthwhile, because I had that privilege of participating in starting these technologies that down the road became so valuable to these soldiers that they were more valuable than food and water for that particular day. And that sense of great accomplishment, knowing that you've participated in something that over time blossoms to that dramatically impactful a capability, that's something I hope for all of you who are involved in this energy challenge. And I hope we together will be in a future down the road in some years where we look around us and we see clean, abundant, efficiently used energy in our factories and in our homes and in our workplaces and in our transportation systems. And I think if we can keep the ARPA-E experiment going in this terrific direction that it started off on, I think each of you will have that feeling of satisfaction of knowing that you got to be part of starting this transformational change that will be so critical to our country in the years ahead. So I want to thank you for the work that you're doing on behalf of all of us in this country and around the world, and I want to wish you every success in creating a new energy future. Thanks for having me today. Thanks, Cheryl.